The Lord opens eyes to see an entire existing dimension of a hidden heavenly host surrounding the people of God, surrounding and bringing protection to those who, by ordinary sight, seem vastly outnumbered. And so, this is a granting of vision into things hidden from sight. And so, it's not that the prophets get a purely symbolic insight. Rather, it is insight into a supernatural, supersensible, presently existing dimension of reality that's simply not accessible by ordinary sight. And so that raises this question, and this is where I think our listeners, if they were reading through this in advance, were reading along and saying, "What what am I looking at here?" Voss says that the nature of this vision forces us to make a distinction with regard to how the prophets would have seen this vision. And I'm going to use some illustrations that Voss doesn't include here to try to make it helpful. But on page 222, if you will look at the about midway down the page, Voss talks about a distinction that is useful for trying to understand how a prophet would see these visions. And that distinction is between, quote, the things thrown upon the screen of inner vision. He says they might have been psychical reproductions, portraits of the reality submitted, or they may have been symbolic figures shadowing the realities but not copying them. Now, I just want our listeners, this might be semi-humorous. I remember the first time I read that when I was in seminary, and I marked it with a question mark. I put a question. I said, "What what in the world is he talking about?" I really truly didn't know. And over the years, as if we've taught through this and thought through this, Camden, I think it's become clearer to us. And Camden, I'd love your input and insight on this, but let me try to make that distinction as clear as I think we can make it and use one illustration for each. And then, Camden, feel free to tweak it and say, Lane, I think there are better illustrations to use and turn us in a different direction, because this is one of the more difficult areas to try to render this clear. But when he talks about things that might be psychical reproductions, portraits of the reality submitted, I think it would be something like this: that sometimes the prophet is given a vision of something that replicates an existing heavenly reality. And that would be, I think, in a case like, think of Psalm 11:4 and Isaiah 66:1. What is heaven? The invisible heavens? It's a temple. The Lord's throne is in his temple, and heaven is my throne. The earth is my footstool. Now, when a prophet receives a vision or is shown something, a great illustration of this, I think, would be in Exodus 25:40, where God shows Moses the pattern
Hmm.
on the mountain of the tabernacle he is to create on earth. And what is that reality according to Hebrews 8:5? It is heaven itself. It is an unveiling of an archetypal temple, and Moses is to make the earthly reality a copy or a shadow of the heavenly things. So when a prophet is thinking about heaven, what image is he going to be thinking about? He's going to be thinking about that earthly copy, and that earthly copy can then become a kind of portrait of the heavenly reality. So when in a vision God shows a prophet a temple, and it's a temple that's being measured, it's a temple that water's flowing out of, like Ezekiel 47 and other texts like that. What's being shown to the prophet is in many instances a psychical reproduction or a portrait of the heavenly thing, and that would be something like the thing on earth. I hope this is useful. Now, I may be missing something here, Camden, so you feel free to amplify this. But but in visions, when a temple is portrayed with water flowing from it, like with Ezekiel, often going to be the case that the earthly copy, the portrait, is what is being used to represent the heavenly original, um, where God dwells amidst the seraphim and now the spirits of the righteous departed. But you could also be thinking of symbolic figures shadowing but not copying the things that they represent. The best illustration I could come up with here, Camden, and I'm not sure it's the best that could be come up with. It's just one that I was thinking through. Think of the beasts in Daniel's vision. In Revelation, in Daniel's vision, Daniel 7, Daniel 9, the beasts in Daniel's vision are symbolic figures that are not true copies of anything on earth, but what do they represent? They represent earthly kingdoms,
Right.
Persian kingdom, Roman kingdom. But what do they look like? Well, they have the face of a man and the wings of a bird. There's a rough, strong beast with iron teeth trampling everything under it that many think would be a reference to Rome. In and so what you have there are symbolic realities, symbolic images, but they shadow but do not copy what they're representing. They're a shadowy, visionary, apocalyptic expression of something that's true of what it's imaging, what it's talking about, namely the Empire of Rome, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence. It's not a copy. It's not like a earthly replica of a heavenly reality. It's more like an
Sure.
apocalyptic image of a nation. And I think that what Voss is saying is that of the sorts of things that prophets see in visions, they're either seeing things that are like portraits of things in heaven, copies, earthly temple, heavenly temple, or they're seeing apocalyptic images like the beasts that Daniel sees that are actually shadowy representations of earthly kingdoms. And this is why Voss is saying that we have to recognize that there's a flexibility and a diversity to the things that are seen and to the things that are shown, and we have to have awareness of that and be attuned to it.